So we can start in if everyone's settled and they have, tea and tissues and anything else that they need at hand. So so I just wanted to thank the directors uh, of the Joan Baez documentary that we just saw. I Am a Noise here at the Pelham Picture House. Miri and Maeve for joining us tonight to talk about the film, to talk about how they made it, and talk about Joan a bit. So thank you. Thanks for taking this time. Thanks for sharing the movie with us, which I really enjoyed. And both as a film lover and a longtime admirer of Joan Baez. So how did this happen? Was this who approached who first? How did this project get going?
Want me to start in, Maeve? Well, we're missing one director, Karen O'Connor, who is not able to be here tonight. But she is actually old friends with Joan. They've been friends for
Hmm.
since I think 30 years, long time friends.
Okay.
They actually became friends when she was doing a little PBS interview with her in the 1980s. And Karen and I have worked together for years and years, mostly for Frontline. And Maeve had edited, worked with us, edited and co-produced our last film that we did for Frontline, and the three of us wanted to do something together. And Karen had long wanted to do something about Joan, and I think we actually we started filming a while ago, trying to figure out in between projects, trying to figure out if there was a film to do, and actually brought Maeve in to look at the footage and was like, "Is there a film here?" And Maeve was like, "I don't know," and back and forth about it. And at the time, there really wasn't. And then I think once Joan started to think about doing a last tour, we were like, aha, that would be an interesting film to do, to follow. She was heading towards 80, and the decisions about stopping and how difficult that is, and what it is to end, that lengthy career in the spotlight. So
Hmm.
that was how we started, right, Maeve?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose initially we thought that we would really do kind of a follow her on the Fare Thee Well tour, kind of 2018 onwards, and which is what we ultimately did. But I suppose we thought that that would be really the core narrative line, and that we would that we would travel with her across Europe and the US and so on and so forth, and document that. And obviously that would be a really rich story in and of itself. And kind of in the middle of following her on that, we ended up going to California. She was taking a break, I think, or whatever it was. And we hunkered down for about a month. And essentially she kind of gave us the keys to a storage unit that she herself had never been in, actually. And so interestingly, I suppose in the film, when you see her kind of pushing the shutters up, that is the first time she's putting the shutters up,
Yeah.
and actually seeing it for the first time. And I think you can kind of see it in her expression that she's witnessing this for the first time, and she didn't realize, but like all of this stuff had been kept. Her mother had kept all of her letters, her diaries. Her dad had done all the home movies. There were tapes, audio tapes, letters home, therapy tapes, et cetera, et cetera. All of her artwork and so on and so forth. So for us, once we kind of discovered that, although it was this massive piece of work to unravel that, like just even technically, but whatever else, it shifted the storyline for us. We realized that we could really immerse ourselves in the past and in the whole arc of her life in a
Hmm.
really immersive, visceral way, where we were kind of like with her in the past, and kind of like then blending past and present in a more evocative way. So that was really kind of it was kind of a catalyst to shift the narrative arc, and have the two narratives, the contemporary and her past story, from primary source material, kind of to tell it that way.
Mary, you mentioned Frontline before, and looking at the filmographies of all the people involved in this, the three directors involved in this. I see a lot of films which are about social issues, which are about progressive causes. Did this feel like just a natural part of that of that work that you've been doing for so long?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I've been trying to think, is it or is it not?
Mhm.
In some ways, our entry into it was because we had done a lot of films about aging and mortality and that sort of thing. And so when we first start, it was more looking at this kind of end of a career, as I said, and a woman aging, and we thought that was going to be a primary piece of it. Um, Obviously, her political history and her social awareness and are all issues near and dear to us. So, but and then there's that huge psychological piece of work about just her psychological history, which I think um, is also a subject matter which Karen and I have done a lot of work in. So in some ways, yes. On another level, no. Like it was a biography. The only other biography I've ever worked on was on Lee Harvey Oswald, and
Yeah.
said in another interview, her archive outdid his, even though I had the Warren Commission. I mean, it was massive. It was just a massive, massive undertaking. Her life was so documented and covered so many pieces of history that I think we were all, and she had this, as Maeve said, incredible personal archive. Her parents documented everything, as did she, as did her sisters. And so I had never done this kind of film with so many elements, artistically and otherwise, running through it. So it was actually a much larger film in a lot of ways.
And I think just,
They-
just to go on that as well, just none of us had done a music doc before, and so like the whole musicality of it, which was also a really fun part of the collaboration and the exploration of in the telling, but it was a little bit daunting. Obviously, her actually we were saying the other day, like I think certainly for me, I kind of became a fan of her music as I kind of listened to her repertoire. And Miri, you were saying the same the other day, and I think it was really interesting to explore her musical life as well and try and figure out how to intersperse the storytelling with really really pivotal pieces of music that were crucial and that were there at the right time and so on and so forth. Diamonds and Rust post the Dylan part, or various other things, and so that was also just a really interesting challenge because we hadn't really integrated music in a music doc kind of way, I suppose, for any of us, because I also have a history more in social issues as well. So
And
many
yeah.
many layers were good, huh?
yeah, even the filming,
Uh,
like the filming of the concerts were complicated. It's
Yeah,
hard.
that was a big learning curve for us. We had to kind of figure out how to film those, and I suppose one of the advantages of me also editing was that I'd throw it together in the edit, and we would just look at it and figure out what was working and what needed more, just lyrically speaking, like what we would want to do to shift it and change it and make it more, more beautiful, honestly, because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it as dreamy as possible, her singing in the contemporary tour. So that was a nice kind of work in progress that we kind of put together as we went.
Yeah.
I also love the scope of this film because you know we've all seen straightforward concert docs of farewell tours or amazing productions, and you could probably name the two or three of them that really work. But this is not a concert doc. That's part of it, but it's the whole of her life. It just has so much breadth to it, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of took us by surprise in one way, as Maeve said, when we went into her storage unit. I mean, I remember when I first heard her audio tapes, she audio taped her letters home. So first there was all this writing and it was constant. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of letters. So they wrote constantly back and forth. And then there were her father taught her how to use this kind of audio recording because he audio taped everything. And it was this voice from the past. And I remember us talking about, okay, we want to be able to bring her past as alive as her present is, and as Maeve said, move back and forth through time, kind of seamlessly. And those 1960s audio tapes of whether it was her going to Montgomery or the March on Washington, or her kind of trying to figure out who she was politically, and I want to start a peace movement. I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but I imagine her, just the development of her as a political activist, from the voice of a 20-year-old, was just, it was amazing. So, I think we wanted to try to do the material justice that we were finding.
Yeah, and
Maeve,
I think that
yeah.
I was
Yes,
just
go
going
ahead.
to I was just going to add to that and say that because each of the layers of source material that we found, for example, her artwork had this trajectory. It had this incredible kind of story that you could almost look at the visuals and kind of follow the narrative. It was that it was jumping off the page like that. It was just, and so it was just so rich, and each layer had its own, like the diaries or the therapy tapes, or the artwork. So you had this incredible rich, these different strands that were really rich that we could utilize at different times in the film, in the narrative, in order to kind of take you from one place to another. So that was, a really interesting part of the editing process, I suppose, when we were in the post.
Well, talking about the editing process,
Yeah.
it must have been, there's so much, my gosh, so much material. I mean, it's kind of like, I feel like someone is presenting you with this gigantic block of Carrara marble and saying, okay, well, find the statue. It's in here somewhere. I mean, what was that process like, and particularly for you, trying to chip away and find, yes, we can use this. No, that's not really germane.
Well, I mean, I suppose we approached it kind of in different strands, which is how I always approach an edit anyway. And so, we put together all of the contemporary strand and just watched all of the different locations all over the world, basically, that she performed in. We also put all the songs together, like There But For Fortune, like 20 different times, in order to kind of see.
And her archive of those songs. So we had her.
Oh, yeah. There was an enormous amount of exactly, so that we could cross if we needed or anything like that. But basically, so we wanted to see the absolute best performance. That was that musicality part, but also the scenes backstage, what was rising and falling in terms of that. So that was one part of the process. And then Miri had done an incredibly meticulous job of documenting the source material. So as I said, we had all the strands. We had the artwork in one big strand, or we had the therapy tapes. We had all the home movies were together. So it was kind of like, there was an investigative layer to it, because it was looking for the things that happened when she was 10, 12, 13. The letter, the psychiatric letter that happened when she was only 8, for example, What I Believe, and what happened with the Quakerism, and her, the beginning of her political awakening, which was really happening at 13, which we knew we could put at the early stages of the film in order to kind of have it resonate later. So there was that excavation in an interesting way. Were you going to say?
Well, now remembering that, like when we first started, when I didn't realize how massive it was, I was color coding everything. So I was like, okay, anytime she talks about anything political, it'll be purple. And whenever she talks about like her psychological, it'll be red. And I had it like very organized. And then it just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger. And then poor Maeve had to like edit everything down. And then we'd be like, okay, we're not using that. And then there was just, it was a massive amount of work. She kept these journals throughout her whole life, as did her mother, as did her sister, so there was 20, 30, 40 journals that you were kind of going through, and it was a little bit investigatory in the end.
It was, and I think as well, like what was interesting as well, we had to kind of, like, I suppose, measure up what was there, and like obviously the family story was really rising to the surface. As I said, her dad filmed everything. He was also a really talented photographer. Her mom had incredible diaries. She also kept all the letters home that Joan had throughout the 60s and so on, 70s, and also just the narrative, the story of this incredibly complicated, brilliant family. Her dad was such an amazing musician himself, even though he was a physicist. He was, and her mom also super talented. And so we realized early on that we needed to understand her family fully in order to tell the story on a deeper level, including her sisters, obviously, and the story of both her sisters, which was really interesting. Obviously, what happened to Mimi and what happened to Pauline, it couldn't have been more different. You're
Yeah.
going to add something to that?
I was just going to add to it. We also didn't have, we luckily a long time ago when Karen and I were first thinking of filming, Karen had done an interview with Pauline, her sister, but it was before we knew what we were doing with the film. It was kind of almost an exploratory interview. We had that interview, but we did obviously had nothing of Mimi because she had died years before. We had nothing of her mother except for what we could find in the archive. And we had decided we did not want to have talking head voices outside of those people that had a true place in the film. So it was tough, but it was like picking through everything.
Yeah.
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 The shot that Maeve referenced before, opening up this vault is like such a perfect image, such a perfect metaphor for this, because it's sort of like, okay, here it is. Here's my life. Here's what I've done. Let's dig into it. Um, was the access that did she make the access that easy and open for you throughout the film, where sort of nothing was off limits, or were there times where you felt you needed to take a step back or change the subject?
Yeah. I don't think we ever felt we had to change the subject. At the beginning, it was definitely, it took a while. I mean, we had Karen and they are quite close. And so, that was a huge help. And I think imbued all the interviews with a certain amount of closeness. And Karen already had a lot of knowledge about her life, which Maeve and I did not have. There was pushback in the beginning about things we were surprised about. We went to go film a voice lesson, which we thought was kind of no big deal. And she was like, no, you are not coming in here. Do not want, it's humiliating. I think she felt embarrassed by the struggle with her voice. And that took a while before she was like, fine, come on in. And then allowed us into the voice lesson. There were times, in concerts where she was just irritated by us and exhausted, and we were like, we have to come film in your hotel room, and it's the last thing she wanted to do. So that there was some pushback there, but she was quite good at opening up her world to us in the end, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and it was the style, the way we wanted to document it was kind of hanging around her and just trying to observe her as possible, which is obviously kind of a bit daunting when you're just trying to have a moment before the concert and you're trying to just, you know what I mean, get ready, which is what she would do. But in terms of the actual source material, in terms of storage unit, she never really wavered on any of that material. She just kind of gave us the keys and allowed us to do it ourselves. Wouldn't you
Yeah,
agree with
yeah,
that?
I do. I think it was emotional for her, and I
Of
think
course.
were quite hard. She hadn't heard her father's voice in years and years. I think going back into her journal, that was a chapter of her life at times that she had put away. So she was reopening a lot of hard times in her life. So I think that was tough. Um, but but no, she did not. She was she had was ready to do this film, I think.
Yeah, I remember she sent us the poem that she had written, the black and white wall one. It's the poem that she reads in the storage unit when she opens the book. She's reading from her diary. That was a really pivot poem. But she gave that. She suggested that. Like it was. She was kind of thinking through and working through these past memories, I think, to some degree, and kind of assisting us on some level.
And I love how, I mean, I could understand her hesitancy about the voice lesson, because that's showing her in a very vulnerable spot. A performer who wants to do their best, and they're being shown in this point. And I can understand her, occasional crankiness backstage because she has a show to put on. But I love that you obviously gained that trust, because it gives way to these wonderful moments of spontaneity where she's like in her hotel room and she hears music down in the street, and the next shot there she is dancing in the street to the music. You know, I mean, those must have been real gifts, those little sort
Yeah,
of unplanned
that was
Yeah,
moments you
great.
had with her.
Yeah.
I think we were both there when that happened, which was just a magical moment of hers, of which there were a lot that didn't make it into the film. The woman is constantly dancing and moved by music, and she, yes, in that way, Joan is who she is. I feel like for somebody who's been in the spotlight as long as she has, there is an unguardedness to her and a realness to her that we didn't have to dig very deep to find. She has gained a confidence in who she is that I've found remarkable since I met her, kind of naturalness, and um, she just does what she does, no matter
Mhm.
who is there, I think to some degree.
Yeah.
And she
And
clearly, yes, Maeve.
no, I was just going to say in bare feet in her pajama bottoms, actually.
Yes.
She just said, I'm going to go out and dance. And we were like,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, she clearly, likes the film and has been supporting it. But what was her reaction when you showed her the first rough cut? Was she excited, embarrassed, critical? When she first saw the film, what did she think?
So I wish Karen was on the call because actually she was the one down to DC and sat with her the first time she saw the film. I think I watched it with her another time. I think we were all incredibly nervous about her seeing it because she really hadn't seen anything. She had no editorial control over the film, so it was, that was she really hadn't seen anything, and I think it was very emotional for her. She loved the film immediately. There was not a lot of mixed feelings about it. Um, but I think it was hard to hear and see it all put together. And I think she has different reactions every time she watches it. I think the scenes with Gabe were particularly hard. I think looking back at
Mhm.
her own mothering. Is that right, Maeve?
I think so too, yeah. And I think also it's so meditative around her family, and her immediate family are gone. So it is in a way it's all about loss as well, I mean, and David Harris had died, fairly recently, and I just think there was just a poignancy there that, must have been hard for her for sure. Yeah, all of it, it's but definitely Gabe and all of that, the mothering as well. And yeah, it is inevitably, it's a life. Like, I mean, it's trying to tell a life in 2 hours, which you can't do, but it's doing our best in that context.
Even as you're working hard right now to get this film out there and promote it, have either of you projects in the pipeline? Do you have things that you're developing now, looking forward to?
I'm in the middle of an edit on Oliver Sacks. It's called The Animated Mind of Oliver Sacks. So I'm
What a
working on.
what a wonderful man he was. I got the chance just to interview him once, and he was
Did you?
just, yeah,
Oh,
just charming, just and
yeah.
very giggly and boyish in his own way.
Yeah, he's a
So you're
really
working on that.
magical human being. Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting project. He's so unique and endlessly fascinating. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great project.
And Mary, what about you?
Well, Karen and I have been, while she's editing, heavy in the promotion of this film, which I have to
Yes.
say it's my first independent film that I've done. And it is so much, the work seems to never end. It is so much work in a different way than other films I've done. So we really haven't had time for anything else. We're finishing this up. We've thought about going back to the last film we did was on transgender kids, and it's now been I think it's coming on 10 years later from that. So one
And
of our,
so much is going on, and so much
yeah,
is
we
happening.
we thought about revisiting those kids who are they were 8 through 18 when we filmed them. And so now they're well into their 20s and 30s. So I think it would be a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
But I really have not break. I need a break.
Yeah. Well, and Miri, if you don't mind me adding this, I just want to pass along my condolences on the death of your father, who was just I never met the man, but his book on the blacklist was just a really formative book for me, going through school, and never mind what he did on the nation. So again, condolences, and he was a real a true mensch, at least to those of us who just knew him from his work.
Yeah, he was.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, thank you. He was a good dad too. He would have really. He passed away kind of right after we had heard that it got into the Berlin Film Festival, this film, and he was my big champion on the film front. So I think he would have loved the film coming out into the world. So
Yeah. Well, thank you both for this film, for sharing it with us, for sharing your time with us. And I, wish it and you nothing but success. I hope lots of people see it, because lots of people should. So
thank
thanks
Thanks.
you.
again.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.